It's March 19th, and the strange side of history awaits. Today, we have a bridge opening hijacked by a sword-wielding protester, a burning aircraft carrier that refused to sink, and a doomed experiment that ended in betrayal. Let's begin. On March 19, 1932, a crowd of nearly 300,000 people gathered beneath the towering steel arch of the newly completed Sydney Harbour Bridge. It was meant to be a moment of national pride, the official opening of Australia's most ambitious engineering project. At exactly 10 a.m., Premier Jack Lang prepared to step forward to cut the ceremonial ribbon. Just before the ceremony could begin, out of the crowd, a man on horseback suddenly charged towards the ribbon. The rider was Francis de Groot, a former officer, riding a borrowed racehorse. Witnesses watched in shock as he drew his military sword, raised it high, and in one swift motion, slashed through the ribbon. Before anyone could react, de Groot loudly declared the bridge was officially open in the name of the decent and respectable citizens of North-South Wales. Security rushed forward, and police officer W.J. McKay grabbed Groot and pulled him from the horse, ending the bizarre interruption. The ribbon had to be tied back together so the Premier could perform the ceremony again. In less than a minute, the grand opening of the Sydney Bridge had turned into one of the most strangest, most dramatic gate crashes in history. A sword, a horse, and a moment no one would forget. After the chaos, de Groot was arrested and fined $5, which is about $400 to $500 in modern value. Not exactly cheap at the time, but for pulling off one of the most bizarre gate crashes, would have you taken the deal? On March 19, 1945, just 50 miles from the Japanese mainland, the aircraft carrier USS Franklin drifted through the Pacific, and at 7:05 a.m., the sailors were preparing aircraft for a strike on Japan. The flight deck was crowded, 31 planes, each loaded with bombs, rockets, and a full fuel tank. Then, out of the clouds, a single enemy bomber appeared. A Japanese D-4Y Judy dive bomber slipped through the carrier's defense. 2 bombs dropped. The first smashed through the flight deck, puncturing into the hangar below. The second tore through the aft section of the ship, ripping through steel and machinery. As the explosions began, fuel ignited, bombs detonated, rockets fired wildly across the deck, and within seconds, the Franklin became a floating inferno. Firestorms swept the ship, secondary explosions shook the carrier for hours. More than 700 men were killed, hundreds were wounded. To the nearby ships, the Franklin looked like a burning wreck that could not possibly be saved. But a small group of sailors refused to abandon ship. Rescue teams crawled into burning compartments, pulling out trapped men. Others kicked flaming aircraft overboard to stop new explosions. Slowly and impossibly, the ship began to move again. Escorted by other vessels, the shattered carrier began its long journey home, and against all odds, the Franklin sailed more than 12,000 miles back to New York. It was a ship that should have sunk, but simply refused to die. On March 19, 1687, deep in the wilderness of what is now known as Texas, one of the most famous explorers in the world walked unknowingly towards his final moments. His name was René-Robert Cavelier sur de Lasso. 5 years earlier, he had become a legend. He had sailed down the Mississippi River and claimed the vast region of North America for France. But his final expedition had gone terribly wrong. He'd missed the mouth of the Mississippi entirely and landing hundreds of miles west in Texas. What followed was a slow collapse. Ships were wrecked, supplies vanished, disease spread through the camps. And then somewhere in the forest of Texas, a conspiracy began to grow. As he led a small group north, desperately searching for the Mississippi River, several of his men quietly decided he could never leave the wilderness again. On the morning of March 19th, he approached a clearing near a river. From the trees, a gunshot cracked through the silence, collapsed instantly, shot in the head by his own followers. His body was left where it fell, no burial, no marker. The man who once claimed a continent for France had vanished in a forest, betrayed by the very expedition he had led. Another day, another strange bite from history. Like, comment, and subscribe. Your next eerie dose is just a day away.